I don't know. Do you want to hit record? Okay, it's recording. Hello, everyone. It is June, finally. We made it halfway through the year. I just wanted to do a few announcements. This will be tonight will be our last member Monday until the fall, because we're going to take our little break for July and August. I'm still seeking some presentation folks for the fall. So if you would like to do this, Jacqui so bravely decided to do this. Great. But we are looking for speakers. Any topics, just I'm still coordinating them for now. So we do have a new member, Jack Cutler. I don't know if you made it tonight, but welcome if you did. We look forward to seeing you at some events. Chris, what do you like first? Yeah, can everybody move, please? Thanks. We also have some new folks in the audience this evening, so welcome. We hope you decide to join us. We're still looking for a financial secretary opening to be filled, and we also we actually now have a coordinator for outside speakers, and she's sitting right next to me. She's going to do great. So thank you for stepping up.
Well, I said I would do half of it.
All right, she's going to do half of it. That's better than none. So we appreciate you stepping in to help. So
I'm helping.
I appreciate you stepping in to help personally as well. We're still looking for some fundraising ideas and looking for alternative spaces, that might be a little less expensive than, here at the Gauntlet Works. But TBD, if you have some ideas, float them our way. Mike, I saw you online. Do you want to talk about the competition coming up?
Sure. Hi, everybody. We have our June competition coming up, fast approaching in a couple of weeks. Images are due on the 14th, which is Sunday. Then our competition night is June 29th. I confirmed with the judge today. He's excited, ready to roll. So hopefully everybody's out there working on some up close and personal images, macro type images. If you have any questions, there's details in the newsletter, or you can hit me up with an email. Thanks.
All right, we'll get to tonight's presentation in a few minutes. Our next presentation is Bill Ward, and that'll be on June 15th, the day after the images are due for the competition. He's going to be presenting In Search Of, and I'm looking forward to that. We do have some events coming up, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and let you take the mic. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Angela. The next speaker, Bill Ward, is a professional actor in the UK, theater and otherwise, and he's an amazing photographer and creative person. So I think you'll enjoy that, and hopefully you'll come out. The newsletter talks about the Philadelphia walk that I'm leading on Saturday, June 13. I need you to email me. The address is in the newsletter if you're coming, and then you'll get the information from me. It will be a mostly full day, rain or shine event, walking probably 5 miles, and with the potential of tack on, but you do not have to do the whole thing. Did you mention Val? Okay, good. Thank you, Val, for taking over. Outside speakers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's good.
So outside speaker coordinator will be Val Hoffman. So thanks, Val. She'll take over for 2027. And I think that's all I have to say. And with that, I'll let you introduce.
And where's my talk up here?
It's in the presentation folder.
Or
in the board documents folder. I uploaded it. Can you get to it on the drive?
So he finds it.
Thank you.
Oh, well, we're bringing up Jacqui's talk. The fall, we have 3 speakers lined up, one from Portugal, and 2 other speakers. It should be a very good fall program. And during the summer, other than the June Philly walk, we'll try to get another walk together that I'll see if I can coordinate. And in the fall, we'll be going out to Green Hills Preserve, probably October. In the last newsletter, I gave information about a talk on mental health and photography. The link is in the newsletter. I've listened to the talk. It's wonderful. It's Jonathan Vanes, one of my favorite photographers, and another person, Nigel. I don't remember Nigel's last name, but they both talk about their mental health struggles and how they used photography to help them along. And it's a very frank, heartfelt discussion. Again, the link is in the newsletter. And I would urge you to take a look at it. Jonathan has spoken to the club, I think, 3 times from the UK on multiple exposures in that type of talk. And in reference to multiple exposures, since I'm supposed to keep talking, Doug Chinnery was our last speaker, also from the UK. And Doug gave a very significant talk on his creative multiple exposures and techniques. And that stimulated 4 members to mimic his process. Extremely exciting. And that's being shared with Doug. So I think from his perspective as an artist and teacher, to then have 4 people try what he's talked about for the first time, that's really neat. That's quite an encouragement for the speaker. Anybody out in the audience, as we're still trying to, on our end, bring up the Zoom slides? Anyone out there in Zoom land have any questions they want to bring up or points they want to raise, thoughts they have for the club?
Please do.
This is not Jacqui's issue. This is the factory warehouse that we did the photo walk to about 2 months ago. I have the ability to probably do that again in the late fall, but I'm not going to repeat that unless I get emails from people saying I would like to come if I'm available, you know, if the date works, that kind of thing. And then I'll work on setting that photo walk up again, but only if I get some emails saying yes. In reference to the emails, again, you have to email me if you're going to join us in the Philly walk on June 13th. And I think with that, I'm going to give the mic to James. You must have something to say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just a little public service announcement.
Get up here.
Okay. The World War II weekend is coming to Reading. In fact, some of it's already arrived. I got to see a B-25 and a B-17 buzz overhead this morning. It's fantastic. You got to see it if you haven't before, or if you have.
Sounds good.
That's this weekend. It begins Friday.
Sorry, folks, for having a problem bringing the presentation up, but it's here. We'll get it to you. Hang in there.
Just having a moment. Nothing new for me. I apologize, everybody.
So another option is your computer. Is there another way to bring it up?
Other. Hey, Jackie, it's on. But don't, you do it.
I can sit here like a charm.
Keep smiling, Jackie. Is this yours?
Yeah, got like 30 of them. It's the National Audubon Society calendar.
Oh, you had your mic on.
Well, I don't need to talk about it. So anyhow, I have a photo in there. They sent me 30 of these. So anybody who wants one tonight, take one.
Where's your photo?
August. The National Audubon Society.
I got it.
Oh, nice. Kim, is this up there?
It's loading right now.
Just showing you Jackie's image from the 2027 Audubon Society, National Audubon Society calendar. This is the August image. That's really cool. And for those who want them, we have the books here.
Yeah, take one because they sent me like 30. I just got them on Saturday. So I brought a number of them today because who needs 30 calendars?
It's just a. Oh, it signed you up.
They'll be the first to give you a 2027 calendar, hopefully. Yeah, I think so. It's less yes. I see it, the presentation. Yeah, that's it.
Right, and we did that one with the other. That's fine, hold on. I think you're gonna do it.
What was that?
Introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about what you do.
But
It's in the slide. Okay. You're hooked up by the internet on there, right?
on my computer?
On the internet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your PowerPoint? Okay. Do you use Safari to get onto Zoom and stuff, or do you have Zoom itself?
I usually go on the internet to get it.
All right, where would you get your link from to go onto the Zoom? Would it be in this email?
To go onto the Zoom, for this, like if I was at home. I'm not,
Right, yep, like, just like you were at home.
well, I would maybe go to our website or to the email if you guys send a reminder email. So I might search Burke's.
There should be right in there. There you are right there. We're gonna join out right there. Eyes up, I don't know. Hmm. Oh, Mac, why have you used the pen? Cause I'm tired. I'm just trying to copy that one. Coming up with okay. Nope. Here. Yeah, but hers is giving an error and it won't let it. Oh, but no, it won't work because I don't have my, oh, yes, it will. Stand by. Appreciate everybody's patience. Probably should have. Great.
Promising.
Can you let us all in then too? And then give me presenting. Great, if you could. Listen, I think I got it. And you're gonna use my tiny little machine and I apologize.
That's all right. I can always turn around and see it up there, I guess, if I must.
They're closed. Stand by.
It's. No. Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Yep. There we go. Should be good. Any reverb anywhere for anybody out there? Can you ask if there's any reverb out there?
Is there any reverberation out there?
You're good.
Thank you.
Great.
Can you? Oh. That's so weird.
You got dropped? Get dropped. Everybody else is still in.
What's that? I'm here and I'm trying to present, so give me 1 second. Things.
Perhaps nothing. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking enough with the slides, let alone without. Yay.
Oh, okay. It took me a while for my,
Way to go, Burke.
how's it look?
Maximize. Oh, yeah.
Stand by.
Oh, yeah.
Nope.
No, the other one.
Are we good?
So,
Looks good.
great.
All right.
And then I just advanced.
So I just did the present, so you're gonna just click on the side.
Wait, I click.
Uh,
Wait, how do I go back? Or arrows?
you can use arrows.
Yeah,
That's easier.
okay.
So there's your start and then everything's back and forth right there.
Okay.
Thank you for your
All
patience.
right. All right, we're ready to go.
Hey.
Okay, so I'm Jacqui Burke. Yeah, probably never do this again. I've been a member of Burke's Photographic Society for 2.5 years now. I guess it was in 2024, Jay was looking for presenters and I agreed to do this. And here I am finally. Still kind of lacking some images in backyard wildlife, but she will see some images from trips too, but I'm going to try to center around backyard wildlife because everybody has that. So a little bit about my background relative to wildlife photography. I grew up in the country in the Poconos near Stroudsburg. I've always been interested in wildlife. I've always owned pets. I've been a horse owner since I was 12. A veterinarian since 1987. Can't believe that's 39 years. I spent a lot of years competing with dogs in obedience and agility, and many more years competing in a wide variety of equestrian sports. I mention this because the dog's activity and the horse activity, it's all animal behavior. Whether I'm a veterinarian behind an exam room table, training my dog, riding my horse, training my horse, it's all animal behavior, and it all has been beneficial in doing wildlife photography. When I'm out with groups, doing wildlife photography, I see that I have a better sense of what the animal might do next than other people because I just do spend so much of my time with animal behavior. So I began to travel internationally for wildlife viewing somewhere around 2010. And at first I just had a little point and shoot, and then got the bridge camera. And then I saw what other people were getting. And so the green eye, green monster of envy pops up. And before you know it, I have a DSLR. So I got maybe that in 2014. And then I didn't begin to really be serious about photography until 2023. Kind of between 2014 and 2023, I was more getting documentary photos of the animals I was seeing. Mostly they're exotic animals, Africa, India, Antarctica, that kind of thing. But in 2023, I was on a trip, and on a break, the trip leader asked to, we were just talking, and she asked to see photos, and I had assembled a little portfolio of photos that friends and family would occasionally ask to see. And she says, "Oh, Jacqui, you got to enter these." So I started entering contests and, joined this club, joined other clubs, and became more serious. But I didn't really start photographing backyard wildlife till 2025. That was last year. Before that, I was still mostly into trips and kind of still am. But last year, my mother was very ill. She spent the first half of the year in and out of the hospital, went into skilled nursing care, and the second half of the year in hospice. So I didn't travel internationally at all last year. I thought I would stay home more and, do more backyard things. So I didn't get quite as far as I'd hoped. I'd still get phone calls all the time, have to rush to the hospital, have to rush to see her. But, it kind of began my trip with trying to get photos in my own backyard. So why would you want to photograph backyard wildlife? Well, certainly it's close to home. You don't need to spend money on airline tickets and, big workshop fees. So that's really nice. And you have daily access and without human intervention. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a park or some kind of scenario like that, trying to get photos, and just spectators see somebody with a long lens and they think you're seeing from here to the moon and back, and you might be seeing a little wren go into its nest, but they'll come up to you with two dogs. "What are you seeing?" "Nothing anymore." And that happens so many times. Just most recently, I was in Arizona last month in a park photographing a lizard, and the lady let the two dogs go right up to the lizard, and that was gone. So at home, it's my property. I can control my own dog, make sure she's in the house, and I'm good to go. You can do it year round. Certainly some birds and things are seasonal, but there's always something going on. And you get to know local species, and even more important, know individuals. So last year I started photographing the bluebirds in earnest. I'd always had bluebird houses and, fed them. But last year I said, okay, I'm going to really get to know them. So I started feeding them live mealworms, and I'd go out there and call, "Bluebirds, bluebirds." Well, I swear on the second day they came. And it was only a week later, the mail would wait for me to drive in, a Jeep Wrangler. It's kind of a, unique vehicle. And he would come and land on the fence and then kind of fly along as I'm getting into the garage and wait to be fed. And I'd go in the house and get the mealworms and he'd be right there. So, you get to know individuals, not just species, but individuals. Another thing, you can photograph using very equipment intensive setups. And we'll get to some of that at the end. Just recently got into camera trapping. Well, that is like sometimes 3 tripods and 2 light stands, 2 flashes, the sensors, the camera. It's a shit ton of equipment that I could never think of. Traveling by air and even in the car, it would be problematic. Repeat opportunities to be creative. You know, if it doesn't work today, we'll give it another go tomorrow or modify your setup a little bit. So I'm going to just show you a few things to whet your appetite of photos I did take at my property. So this is a female cardinal in snow. It's kind of a nice photo. Whenever you have the opportunity to photograph in snow, take it. It's the great leveler of backgrounds. You know, we in wildlife photography always want the animal in a nice, clear background, so the eye goes right to the animal. There's no better way to shoot than in snow, so take it whenever you can. And here, a little macro shot of a crab spider. We'll get just a brief into macro briefly, just with some tips I have, not the whole deal. And just a cottontail rabbit in the yard. So here, notice the low angle. You need to get really low. We want that little narrow slice of focus because we want the foreground to go into be very smooth, and particularly the background, so the eye goes right to the subject. You'll see that over and over tonight, that low angle, low perspective, low depth of field. And here, white-throated sparrow, again in winter, always take that opportunity. And we call this guy Alvin. He lives in the backyard. So here we have, a little bit more complicated background, but then it adds to the photo by showing him in his environment. So this is not just an Alvin photo, a chipmunk photo, but gives a little vignette into his life. And here the background still plays a really important part. And here's a bluebird. I actually took this from inside my house. So this is the male bluebird I was so friendly with last year, and maybe it's the same one this year. He would land always on that branch. And just off the porch, there was a flowering plum tree. And at the time he was starting to make the nest and nest with the female, the plum tree was in bloom. And I said, how can I incorporate the blooms of the plum tree and get the bluebird and have that be like bokeh? So I went onto the porch, and it was too close. It was too pink. It was not well defined enough. So I went in the house, opened the window, took the screen out, and I got that bokeh. And just as I got him in the camera, he flew down to get an insect from the grass, and I got the flight shot. So that was taken from actually on my sofa in my house. And just a young buck deer with a fawn in the backyard. Just kind of neat to see, a male deer with a fawn. You don't really think about that. But even there, I managed to get a fairly nice background. A little toad on the driveway. And that was like with a macro lens, and I think at f/22. Some winter birds, white-breasted nuthatch, and a pileated woodpecker. And another deer in snow. You can always get the snow photo, just works so well. So now we'll talk about, just really briefly, about making your backyard wildlife friendly. So you can kind of find out what's there and what works for them, or you can find out what you want and kind of see what they need. So you could go in two directions. But in any case, animals always need food. Natural food is best. So berries for many different kinds of birds. That could be holly berries, cedar berries, so many different types. But it can be feeders. Increasingly, wildlife biologists kind of are going against feeder feeding. It changes the distribution of species. Like, for example, it favors blue jays and crows in the winter. But then when the migrating songbirds come back and nest and have eggs and chicks, then there's too many crows, too many blue jays, and they'll feed on the eggs and the chicks. So it kind of favors those species over the migrators, and it favors those who eat seed over those who don't eat seed. So myself, I sometimes have feeders and sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's that I get frustrated with the European starling. I'll have a good setup going. I'll have, my photography thing all ready, and suddenly 20 starlings find my feeder, find my backyard, and it's kind of all over because they can clear you out, day after day after day. So right now I'm in that frustrated thing where I don't have feed up, but I am feeding the bluebirds the live mealworms. Go out there and say, bluebirds, and there they are. And they need water. For myself, that's just a little backyard bird bath. And sure enough, we see the birds coming all day long to drink out of it. The deer will drink out of it, and the squirrels will pop up there and drink out of it. So just as something as like a simple little bird bath is all they really need. And shelter, ideally protection from the elements as well as some predators. So you should have like shrubs near the bird feeders and near the water, so the little birds have a place to go. We have a Cooper's hawk I see often in the backyard. I've never seen him take out a bird, but I've seen the evidence. We'll go in the backyard and there'll be a pile of feathers. I have seen a red-tailed hawk twice kill squirrels in the backyard. So, they need shelter. They need to be able to come, the smaller birds, and feed in safety. If they know the hawk is there somewhere, they can quickly dive in. And then ideally, bird houses or nesting sites or denning sites for things like foxes. So we ourselves are a National Wildlife Federation certified wildlife habitat. So again, it says to sustainably provide for food, water, cover, and places to raise young. If you meet the requirements, you can apply to get one of these. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about, before we get into some techniques, what makes a good wildlife photo. And as many of these as you could have in one photo, obviously, but a compelling subject, something that interests people. Light that adds impact. So it doesn't have to be the golden light, or the soft light, but it should add impact to the photo. Sharpness where it matters. Pose, gesture, behavior. The animal doing something is always going to beat, a bird on a stick. That's a derogatory term that we wildlife photographers can use when you have a plain drab bird on a plain drab stick, not doing anything. So, let's try not to take so many bird on a stick photos. Clean composition and background. So we've already gone into that a number of times, how we want the background to not, we want it to be plain. We want the attention to go to our animal. We only want the background to be there if it's going to add to the photo. We've heard that time and time from other presenters, that everything in the photo should add to the photo. Connection and story. The more the viewer can connect with the animal and what it's doing, or, if it suggests a human emotion, that can add. Sense of place, so if the background is there, it should add a sense of place. Where does this animal live? What is it doing? And respect for the subject. That's not hard, not easy to show in a photo, but the viewer should at least know that the photographer respected the subject. So we'll go through each of these, with a couple examples before we get into some techniques. So a compelling subject. So again, the animal should be interesting or expressive, beautiful, unusual, or doing something neat. And the viewer should immediately know what the photo is about. How many times in our contest, the judges will say, well, what's the subject? We don't want that in a wildlife photo. We want to definitely know what the subject is. So here, I'm going to have just a few examples. So male wood duck is always a compelling subject. They have every color of the rainbow. We're from reds to orange to yellows to greens, blues, purples. And then that little water droplet at the end adds his interest. He's not really doing anything, but, we always want a little something extra. And I'll talk here about the low point of view. So I was actually in the water when I took this photo, had the waders on, the camera, I was hand holding it, but it was a big lens and I'm right above the water. Because that adds intimacy to the photo, but also what it does, it gives you that wonderful background. So now you have that little tiny slice of the photo being in focus, just from the front of the duck, nothing in front and nothing behind. And that's what we're really after in a wildlife photo, that little tiny bit of focus so that we're really clear what the subject is, or eye goes right to it. And then the eye is sharp here. So again, not a lot in this photo is sharp, but what needs to be sharp is sharp. And so here's one I took in Florida. Again, these examples are not all from my backyard. With Mom being so sick last year, I didn't get as many as I had hoped to, but I still have quite a few. So a compelling subject because it's carrying this giant stick, even though it's a common bird, a great egret is something that has nearly a worldwide distribution, but it has an elegant gesture, a graphic design, that really nice high key look, clean composition and good feather detail. And this one was taken in my daughter's backyard. I was over there and found these little owlets. It just happened to work out really well. So a really compelling subject. It's looking right at the photographer, the huge eyes, the fluffy texture, the direct stare, getting it sharp where it matters. And then light. So it could be, many different kinds of light can work for wildlife photography, but it should always add to the photo. Soft, warm, directional, dramatic, or carefully controlled. It should reveal the subject and help create mood. So here we have backlighting. This one was in my backyard. So I was photographing that bluebirds in front light. So you want to photograph the bluebirds in front light because blue is a color that only the mandarin fish, which I did get to see when I went to Indonesia, has blue as a pigment. In every other species, it's structural. So the light needs to hit the male bluebird to look blue. If it's in front light, they actually look gray. Like sometimes, is that the male or is that the female? When the light isn't right. In the evening, when I go to feed, it is, they're so blue in the right light. So I was photographing the bluebird in front light, and I turned around, and there's a rabbit looking at me. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. So he was backlit. So the bokeh balls are light coming through the forest behind, and it just really works that you can see his ears and the veins in there, that little slice of focus because I'm down low, just the rabbit in focus and just a little bit of grass. He stands out well from the background, that low perspective in good color harmony, kind of nice photo. This obviously not in the backyard, but here we have soft light, right at dawn. So it creates that really soft mood, which goes really nice with the slow shutter speed and the blue colors, just kind of so relaxing. And the motion blur really works here. And I took this just last month in Arizona in somebody else's backyard. So this is a white-winged dove, or two white-winged doves. It's a species of the desert Southwest. So anybody who knows ornithology at all would know that this is a desert species. So it's kind of harsh light, but that's what one might expect in Arizona. And then the cactus skeleton kind of tells us that. And here with that harsh light gives that little extra something of the shadow of the head on the other one's wing. And we get just the birds in focus. The soft background was actually a distant mountain. And this was a captive bird. I was at St. Augustine Alligator Farm in Florida. I went there to photograph the rookery, where they have wild birds with captive alligators in a swamp. But then there's trees, and wild birds come there to make their nests. They're protected from predators like feral cats and raccoons because of the alligators. So, once in a while a chick might fall out of the nest and gets eaten by an alligator, but that far beats the higher death toll from cats and raccoons. So everybody goes there early in the morning to do the rookery. And then as the light gets harsh, all the photographers leave. And then they have this exhibit called The Birds of Africa. And I'm walking by leaving, and I saw the way the light was playing on that crown. And I said, oh my God, I got to get that, and I'm the only photographer getting this. Granted, it's a captive subject, which, bird photographers don't always like, but I just love the way that shadow, that harsh light created the shadow over the face and then again over the body, and I've actually competed this photo and it's done quite well. So again, harsh light can sometimes really work for you. Sharpness where it matters. So, at least the eye and face should be sharp. In wildlife photography, often that's all we really are going for. But motion blur can also work really well when it feels intentional, but not when it feels like you use too slow of a shutter speed and your subject is blurry. So a few of those. So here, a turkey. I took this just last month in Arizona. So the head and face are sharp. And then the fact that it kind of loses sharpness in the front is kind of okay because your eye goes from the head and then follows the neck around and follows the spiral. Of all that texture in there, all the pattern and design, some color interest, but it's sharp where it needs to be. And here, a snow goose. So it's sharp where it needs to be. It's a motion blur study, but it's sharp in the head and neck. And so, it works because it's sharp where it needs to be. And this was a bronzed cowbird. I took this in Texas. So what this will do is, it's the male because he has the red eye. He'll jump up in the air and then hover there and show the female, look at how great I am. Look how great I am. So I use this slow shutter speed to kind of show that movement, that he's hovering in there and showing off to the female. But it works because the head and neck are sharp. And then the slow shutter speed, allowing the wings to go soft, actually works for the photo. That low angle works. We get the soft background again with the low angle, and good subject separation here. Pose, gesture, or behavior. So again, we want the animal ideally to be doing something. I mean, a portrait can be nice, but even just a head turn in a certain way, a wing stretch, interaction, predator-prey behavior, feeding, mother and offspring, something, either one animal or two animals of the same species, be it male and female, mother and offspring, or even two different species interacting could be really interesting. And that could be storytelling as well. So this was in my front yard. These are my bluebirds. So this was early last year. This is courtship behavior. I went out there and called, bluebirds, bluebirds. And the male came, he grabbed the mealworm, and she was waiting on the branch, and he went to feed her, before mating. So, that branch actually adds to the composition, being diagonal. The bokeh background works really nice. The color works really nice. It's just a nice little moment. And the fact that you can see both the heads and the female is actually looking, the eye towards the photographer is nice. And I took this last month in Arizona. These are two Gila woodpeckers. So any guy who says that he feels he's berated by his wife, well, look at this. This is the male berating the female. The male has the red cap and the female does not. And he actually chased her up that cactus skeleton right off of it. So, the two animals or two birds interacting there is nice. Good behavior, good gesture. We have the connection between the two of them. And again, the soft background that's not distracting. Like it to be even less contrasty. But again, we're in Arizona where things are what they are with the lighting. And I took this just this spring in Philadelphia area, female wood duck. So that's a strong pose. So what they will do is they'll dive forward to get, like, if you throw them acorns, which is their preferred food, or corn, they will do like a little porpoise dive, dive up and then down. And then when they come up, their wings are wet and their body's wet, and then they'll shake. So it's a sequence, again, knowing behavior that you can kind of focus on and kind of think, okay, she just dove down. She's going to come up, 2 out of 3 times they'll do the wing shake. And so I was ready for that. I was in the water, had the waders on, and got that. So clean background, good gesture. I'll use this to talk about wing position. And then I remember I didn't talk about head position, so maybe we'll go back a little bit. But wing position. So there's always a debate, where do you want the wings, the full up or full down? And for waterfowl, they often have that speculum. So that's that blue-green portion of the wing. And it's just so beautiful and so colorful that particularly for waterfowl, you want the full extension down so you can see that. If the wing is up, it's just kind of off-white, tannish on the bottom. It's not really pretty. So other species, the next photo will go over that. But let me quickly go back to the duck. Sorry about that. I said I wasn't a good speaker. So we'll talk just here. I wanted to talk about head angle. So most of the animals we're going to be photographing have beaks, bills, snouts, or muzzles. So the full frontal rarely works. Just imagine like a horse, with full frontal. You really don't see the profile of the muzzle it has. So we're kind of like liking that 45-degree angle is the ideal. So it connects with the photographer. You see the eye is directly to the photographer. So full frontal's too much. Nothing greater than 90 degrees. Once the head angle passes 90 degrees, there's no longer that connection. The viewer feels the animal is leaving us, it's going away. So just keep that in mind. And even for the body, it should be coming towards the photographer or equal to the photographer. Once the viewer gets the idea the animal is leaving, it's kind of too late. So here there's an exception for the owl. It's one of the species that has a big head and a small beak. A frontal is okay on that. But think about your head angle. And the rabbit, it kind of worked here too, a frontal, but 45 might have been nicer. But then it works because of his ears. You get that nice full ears and going there. Okay, so we talked about that. So here, hummingbird, I took this last month in Arizona in somebody's backyard. It's, good color, that compositional kind of sea thing works well, very clean background. And here I chose the position with the wings fully up. And that's because look at that gorgeous shimmer on the body. There's way more of that iridescence on the body of this bird than just a little bit on the top of the wing. So if the wings were forward, you just see a little bit of the iridescence. And here you see that gorgeous iridescence in the body. This is not something you're necessarily thinking as you're shooting away. So, you're not thinking, oh, the wing position is up, I'm going to shoot now. You're just going at a rapid frame rate, but you're picking the photo afterwards. If you have a photo of this and you pick the full forward versus the full back, I picked this one. But in no case should you really pick the intermediate wing positions. You don't want what we call pancake wings, or the wings are straight out. That's never, unless the bird is banking, but otherwise the wing position straight out or anything in between is not nearly as desirable as full extension in either direction. Clean composition and background. So the subject should stand out clearly. Watch for clutter. We want everything in the photo to add to it. We don't want clutter. We don't want bright distractions, awkward branches, man-made objects, unless they're adding to it. And particularly those that intersect with or through the subject. And be really careful where the horizon line ends. We don't hate that guillotine, like going through the head and neck. It's just really bad. So if you can avoid that, please do. Use negative space and framing intentionally. So we'll have a few examples of that. So just, a spider, this was in my front yard, so a kind of a compelling subject from an ordinary place, a clean background, good design. And this one, fox. So again, a clean background, good subject separation, good direction of movement. And I'll talk here about the leg position. So again, not something you might think about as you're photographing, but as you're choosing. So I would have preferred the leg towards the photographer be forward rather than the leg away. And that's because you see most animals have that lighter color breast underneath. So you follow the red down the head and neck, and then you get to the white before resuming the red that's extended. Whereas if the other leg were forward, you could see that the red would come down the neck and the shoulder and into the darker fur forward without that white interruption. So if you can get the leg towards the photographer leading, that is desirable. And then briefly, the direction of motion. When you can get the animal going from left to right, it's preferable than right to left. And that's just because the way we read is left to right. And so the psychologists say it's better to have the movement from the left to the right. So if you took a photo and it didn't work, you could consider a horizontal flip. Like if you were going to be entering it or printing it or something, you might consider flipping it. And here, not every wildlife photograph needs to be the whole animal. So I took this just last month again in Arizona. I was on a balcony and this was a turkey. It was feeding below the balcony. And I was like just stunned by how the iridescence and all the colors there. So composition can be just something like this, as long as there's nothing that detracts from it. And, that this can work too. And then this one, you can have like a breaking the rule kind of photo. So this was in New Mexico. I was standing on a pedestrian bridge in a little pond, and the ducks were on the pond. And then on one side of the pond, there was a daycare center, and the teacher came out with the students, the little tiny kids, with bread. And so all the ducks are like, yeah, I'm swimming from the bigger part of the pond underneath the pedestrian bridge. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to grab something unusual. So it was a black duck, the water was black because it was in shadow. So, you can do things like this with composition, have a whole lot of negative space, and the light was dramatic. It kind of hit that face just right. And, can kind of work. And then you can have the outlier concept with composition. This was last spring in Cape May County. I went to do the bird migration. If you haven't been to like the Delaware Bay in May, you got to go because there's horseshoe crabs come to spawn and they lay eggs at the exact time that birds are migrating, from the southern area up to the Arctic tundra to breed. And there'll be thousands and thousands and thousands of shorebirds there, and they stay for several days. They double their weight because the horseshoe crabs are so very nutritious. These birds double their weight before completing the migration to the Arctic. So here I was there on the beach early in the morning. The tide was up. There's just this little narrow space of beach. The birds would like run down to the shore to feed, and then the surf would come in and they'd rush back. So I got this, and I was just so happy to have one lone ruddy turnstone surrounded by all these sanderlings. Connection and story. So the image should make the viewer feel something or wonder what is happening. If you can kind of get the viewer to evoke a human emotion, there should be eye contact, emotion, humor, tenderness, or something that, you really kind of connect the viewer to the animal you're photographing. So here, obviously, a really excellent example, not in my backyard, but in Japan. This is a very human-looking animal with a very human-like gesture, good eye contact, directly looking at the photographer. It's sharp where it matters, a lot of texture, a lot of nice color, detail. And I took this just in April in Philadelphia. So, they say every wildlife photographer should work on giving back by doing like stories, photojournalism stories and, having the world see your photos. So I decided to do first like a feel-good story before I get into some less feel-good stories. So in Philadelphia, there's American toads that spend their winter at this place called the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education. They have well over 300 acres, and the toads overwinter underneath the leaf litter. But then in the spring, they kind of come awake, and then they have to cross a busy Port Royal Avenue to get to the Roxborough Reservoir to breed. And in years past, one particular woman saw that in the morning, so many dead toads, day after day after day. So then it got started where there's toad detour. So they literally close the road and have volunteers out there. And I went down there like 6 times to do this. Just last week, I did it again to help the toads cross. And, it's a family thing. Like sometimes there'll be 20, 30 people out there and these little kids, and they're like gathering up the toads and crossing them across the road. So I got this photo. It wasn't like quite how I planned it. So the child was looking into the bucket. It's perfectly black out. I have one flash on my camera. I'm trying to get the camera to focus, and he raises his head like right at the wrong moment, and I cut off his eye. But then I kind of was looking at it like, do I like this or don't I like it? And I kind of come to think whenever I have to question that, there's probably at least something there. So I know it's kind of odd, but it tells a story. You can kind of see the kid is helping the toad. He's dressed in the crossing uniform, the vest. The toad's in the bucket. Your eye goes from the face down that bright vest into the bucket, and you eventually find the toad. So it's a storytelling photo. And then this one I took this spring too. This is the ducks again. So these ducks, remember, do that porpoising thing. So this is where the female duck is going into the water. So, it's a story without a face. And yet, it's kind of dynamic. And then I kind of like it because you can almost imagine that foot within the water looks like the head of a frog. Is it just me? Like, see, the blue thing is its eye, and the dark thing is the mouth, and the yellow is, I mean, is it just me or is it? So I was like, I kind of like this photo. And this is the kind of thing like bird photographer of the year will do really well. I mean, have it potentially like things that are oddities. So it doesn't always have to be your whole animal, your facial thing, but it can work too. So sense of place, habitat or weather or season. Not everything has to be really tight. Even myself, I shoot tight too much. The camera's, that lens is big, it's heavy, it's hard carrying two cameras. You get tired, your back hurts. So even I know I need to shoot wider more, but I do shoot wide. And here is one example. So I shot this in Patagonia, we first saw just the rainbow. We're driving, looking for pumas early in the morning. It's the ideal place to go to photograph pumas. You can see them very, very easily there. And from me to that door, puma will walk by you. But it was early in the morning. The rain had just stopped. The light was coming up. We saw the rainbow. We ran to the top of the ridge to get the landscape shot. I actually ran to get a landscape shot. And then the guanaco was lying down and we didn't even see him. And it stood up and it stood in the perfect position to get like what we call a animal scape or wildlife in the landscape photo. So again, this can really work as a landscape photo too. And this one was my backyard photo or front yard photo. So it doesn't always have to be that exotic location like in Patagonia. So here it's kind of more about the sense of place than the bird. This was a little bit later than the other photo I showed. So the bright red is the new leaves of the tree. This tree has like dark reddish purple leaves when they're mature, but when they're immature, they're bright red. And you have just a wonderful sense of spring. You can tell the leaves are immature because they're that yellow green, the blossoms, the red leaves, and then against that bright bluebird. Even a sense of place. You see that my fence for the horses in the lower portion of the photo. So again, a wildlife in the landscape photo can work quite well. And here, it's a brown creeper on a tree in my backyard. So even though it's not a grand landscape, it's as much about the background and the bird together as it is just the bird. And so sometimes even when you don't see the bird's face or the bird's eye, you can have a photo that works. There's just wonderful colors and pattern and texture there. And respect for the subject. So this isn't something that's easy to show, but on the other hand, it's kind of easy to show the opposite. When there's not respect, the viewer can pick up on that pretty quickly. So try to get your photos without stressing the animals, disturbing them, endangering them. Let them behave naturally. If the animal is stressed, it will show in the photo and the viewer will know that. There's so many different ways animals can show stress, show that they're nervous, and viewers pick up on that. And it makes the photo not be a nice photo. Use controversial practices such as baiting and calling with moderation. Bird calling is where some people just use their phone with like the Merlin bird app, and you can find what species you want to call, play the call, and some birds will respond to that by coming out, being visible. But remember, if they're responding to your call, they're not doing what they should be doing. If they're defending their territory by responding to your call, they might be missing a true invader. So try to use those things with moderation, if at all, and use your setups responsibly. So now we'll just talk a little bit about like maybe settings. Maybe we'll just go, because we started late, to the wildlife settings and kind of bump over to landscape if you're interested in that. So we want to use a really fast shutter speed, at least 1,000th of a second. You really have to beg me to use a shutter speed less than that. In fact, I rarely shoot at less than 2,000th of a second. And even if it's a portrait you're after, just remember that something better may be happening soon. So I've so many times had a portrait set up And then something happens. Another bird comes and they interact. Like there's two bluebirds when the male gave the mealworm to the female. I didn't know that was going to happen. I was shooting the male, but I used enough shutter speed, to get that. And I actually have one of her flying in too. So you never know when you never know what the animal's going to do next. And even if you're committed to the portrait, they might do something better, and you're going to not get a good photo if you don't have a good shutter speed. I'll shoot up to 8,000th of a second for birds in flight. For hummingbirds, you absolutely need 8,000th of a second if you're going to shoot without flash. And even splashes, water droplets are best at 8,000th of a second. So, consider that. I usually shoot wide open, or very nearly wide open, because we're going to get that wonderful bokeh background. If you stop down, you're going to start seeing detail in that background. It's going to be less nice. Plus, you need the fast shutter speed. So you don't want to have a excessively high ISO. So that kind of makes you do the wide open aperture anyhow. So ISO, it's obviously not a creative element, like aperture is a creative element instead of shutter speed. But you often need a high ISO to get the shutter speed. So don't be afraid of 6400 or, that photo of the shorebirds in black and white was at 20,000 ISO. And by the way, I have, Ginny is going to put this PDF into the next newsletter. So at the very end, there's a list of the stats for every photo in here. The shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, and the focal length. So people could review the photos later and see what my stats were on that, because I've learned so much by doing that myself. So that will be in a PDF that you'll have access to. And also for the equipment that I talk about later, you don't need to be writing things down or anything, because that will be in the PDF. So frame rate, so you want a high frame rate. Again, these animals are moving, they're blinking, they're turning their heads. Just keep shooting. Sometimes I rarely shoot at less than 20 frames a second. If I'm anticipating good action, I could go up to 60 frames a second. You have to be careful about buffering out sometimes. That's where there's too many photos in your buffer and they can't write to the card fast enough. And then something even better happens and I'm buffered out. The camera can't take any more photos. But, you should be thinking about being at 20 frames a second for most things. And then the focus mode, continuous. You want the camera always to be focusing because, again, the animals are moving even small amounts. So very, very briefly, we'll talk about some equipment. Certainly the way to go is mirrorless cameras with the animal or bird ID. In the old days, we were chasing the animal around with the little focus box and this bird's bouncing right and left and here and there, and you're trying to chase it with the focus box. Now you just put it on bird ID and worry about your composition and what it's doing and not the little focus box. Do the rapid frame rate, as I talked about, and use a fast card. And then there's the full frame camera versus the crop frame camera issue. So I myself shoot with Olympus, that's a micro 4/3. So you get a lot more apparent reach with that camera at a lower weight. I do most of my photography handheld. And if you use a full frame camera, you need to get out to 600 millimeters or more, you're going to have a big heavy lens. So you need to think about that. But full frame has some advantages, obviously, too. And then even within the full frame versus crop frame, you have the number of megapixel issues. So say like Sony full frame, they'll have 24 megapixel cameras and one up to 68. So for wildlife, you might want to think about the 24. So it works way better. It does way better photography at high ISO, which again, we're often shooting high ISO. And I think Jared Platt talked about that a little bit, the low megapixel camera being better for high ISO. So you might want to think about that. Most people have their cameras, but if you don't, you're thinking about getting one, consider. So a fast lens, one that has a large aperture. So like 2.8 or 4.0 is ideal. So it's really much better in low light. Plus, remember the camera focuses at the maximum aperture. So if the lens is a 2.8 it's going to find focus so much faster than a 5.6 or a 6.3. I mean, I went on a trip once and the woman had a f11 lens, a Canon f11, and she's wondering why nothing's in, because she can't get anything in focus. Like, we're in the rainforest and she has an f11 lens. That didn't work out too well for her. So, because he wanted to acquire focus fast. These animals are moving. The more light is let in, the faster the camera can react. But these lenses are unfortunately larger, more expensive, heavier, blah, blah, blah. So lengthwise, we're talking 600 millimeters or more, particularly for backyard. We're mostly going to be doing birds, but occasionally do some wide angle. I have a few wide angles in here. Macro lenses for macro, or you can even use your telephoto as a macro lens. Tripod. Again, I rarely shoot with a tripod unless I'm on a setup or in a blind. But I'll show some heads for that. So here are the two heads I would recommend. On the left, we have the gimbal head. So that goes right. I have the Gitzo tripod on the bottom, and then the gimbal head goes on top. From there, it attaches to the foot on the lens, never to the camera itself, but to the foot on the lens. And you can swing that camera all around. It'll remain in that same position. So, you can have it up in the air, down, right, or left, and it'll stay. The Wimberley Sidekick is a way of making your already possessed ball head into a gimbal-like device. So here on the right, I have the same Gitzo tripod with the Really Right Stuff 55 ball head with the Wimberley Sidekick on the side. And then you can do the same thing and you can do with the gimbal head. And here's the Wimberley gimbal head and the Sidekick. So you can see how that vertical part attaches to the ball head when the ball head is in that notch on the side. And then you can move the camera all around. It'll stay where you put it. The pan tilt, thing. And then I use this thing quite a bit, the skimmer ground pod. It's really particularly good for shooting in sand, but also mud or puddles. You can get that really low perspective and it keeps the camera dry. It's plastic, water doesn't get into there. And so this is example. Yeah, I'll show that soon. So this is Wilson's plover I shot in Florida last spring. And this was really loose sand. It was just absolutely perfect for that skimmer pod. So you can put it on the sand, and I was looking through the LCD viewfinder flipped up and noticed how nice this bokeh is. So just that little band in focus where the bird is. And here I don't particularly mind that the horizon line of the sand and the water go right through the neck because it's so soft you barely see it. And another Wilson's plover, you get that. Often photo contests really like that way that it is in the front, and that's because there's sand in the foreground that's blocking the bird, but it really leads you softly into the bird. And here's how you can use the gimbal head on top of that skimmer ground pod, which I find I don't use so much because it already is getting the camera a bit high. The advantage of it, though, is you have the full tilt pan movement there. But what I tend to use is just this little quick release clamp. And I'll put that right on the camera, right like that. It doesn't work so well for grass, but again, it's kind of really nice for sand, something with a malleable or mud, or sometimes in puddles. You get really low. The camera's protected from that moisture from the sand. And if this is too low, then you can add this little riser block. So you put the little riser block here on top of the skimmer pod, and then that little receiving clamp on top, and you have it a little higher. Like if there's something, a little grass in your foreground or a little rise of sand, a little rise of dirt, you can get over that.
Make them for your lens.
Yeah. And then I'll give you some tips on photographing skittish or shy animals. So even in your backyard, not everything is gonna let you get up close and personal and stand there and photograph it. So a couple of things I use. So a blind, and that could be either a permanent blind, and you see this sometimes these in parks or like at the Mill Grove in Audubon, they have some permanent blinds, or you can have transportable blinds. Or what I'd use a lot is on an unmanned camera with pocket wizards, or use camera trapping. I'll briefly go through some of these. So here's a blind I have. I bought this at Cabela's. I might not have got this one if I kind of thought about it more. But anyhow, the camera's on a tripod in there. So you always want to use a tripod if you're in a blind. And the reason is you're in a blind to have the animal not notice you, to minimize movement. Remember I said the cameras get heavy, there's a big lens on there. Nobody can hold it up for so long. So if you're not on a tripod, you're going to get tired of holding it. You're going to take it down. And then the act of putting it back up is movement. And that's going to potentially. So you want to have it on a tripod. You want to have the camera right at eye level so you can just move your face into the viewfinder and look through it without ducking down, without standing up. And try to have it already pointing where you think the animal is going to appear. And you can do that from a standing position or from a sitting position. But again, always on a tripod and always at that level of your eye. So you can just move your face into the, you're kind of looking for the animal outside the camera. But then when you see it, you move your face to the camera and start taking photos. Yeah, because it doesn't come down on the side as nice as I might like. You can kind of sneak it in the side there where that rectangle is, but there's ones that open differently and that are give you more options of where to put your camera through than this one. But it was already mine, it's fine now, so. And then we'll talk about the unmanned camera. I love these things. So these +X receivers, you have one near the camera with a cord from the +X receiver into the sync port of the camera. And then the second one you're using as a remote control. And here's a typical setup that I might do. So say I'm anticipating a woodpecker at the green star and I want to use flash. So I have my flashes on light stands or tripods. And then the camera is in the front. In the hot shoe is the flash controller. And then the thing to the left is that +X transceiver. And then you can see the black cord goes up to the sync port. And then opposite the green star, I have that little stick. And that just, so I'm in the house, I can see where to shoot when the bird is opposite on the other side. And I do this a lot in the winter. So it might be 0 degrees out, and you actually the birds are really active because the colder it is, the more they need to feed, they come way more. And it'll be 0 degrees out there. We're yeah, it's kind of cold to shoot. Oh, I'll just do my setup. So then I can only shoot when the bird is in one particular position, but I actually have 2 sets of these. They're not that expensive. I think you saw it was $200. So I have 2 sets of these. And so I can sometimes have a wide angle going on, I'll call that A, and a telephoto B, and, just with the binoculars. And whenever I see the bird in the correct position, I'm just, zapping away. So here it shows it again, the camera with the transceiver up there and the flash controller. And I have this little thing, the small rig. So this is what's holding the transceiver is in that cold shoe on the small rig. I like this better than an L bracket. So when I have a short lens on here, I can still use it on top of the ball head. And if I put another bracket on the side, I can use it in a vertical orientation. But I like it better than the L bracket because it still gives me full movement of the LCD screen. I like the LCD screen flipped out and into a horizontal position so I can look down on it when I'm doing those low angles. So the camera will be in one plane and the LCD screen is a completely different plane. But with the L bracket, it won't come out. No matter how I set it, it won't come out to the degree I like it. Where with this, I certainly can. But then if I want to use the camera in the vertical orientation, I just screw on another little plate and put it into the ball head. So here, it was not this telephoto setup, but here is a wide angle setup. And I'm not claiming that this is a grand photo. Remember, I'm still in the exploratory phase of backyard wildlife photography. But this is a flash photo. So here The two flashes were on the bird. The camera was right up its nose. This was at 14 millimeters. And I'm just kind of playing around to see what I can get. So with time, I'll try to get a little bit more, inventive and explorative, but this is kind of just showing you what you can do.
Was the green star tell the bird where to go?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't explain that. Yeah, excellent, Vince. So what I do is put a little suet there. So I just dug a little hole out behind the bark and put in suet. I buy something called bark butter from Wild Birds Unlimited, or you can make your own. So you use like a third beef suet and you heat it, a third peanut butter and a third cornmeal. So it makes like something that's not greasy when you touch it because the cornmeal kind of absorbs all the grease. And then you can kind of push it into the bark or push it into a hole. You got the birds trained first. So backyard wildlife photography, you just don't go out there and say, I want the bird there. You got to train them first. And I train the bluebirds. Like you can literally train them. They're about food, just like everything else, just like a dog or cat. They want to be fed. So, it just knew that there's always going to be, many times there's going to be the bark butter there. That's where I go. So yeah, I could shoot the bird all day long. Different birds. This was a hairy woodpecker, a male, because you can see a little hint of red behind his head. And this is my little bluebird friend. Again, not claiming to be a grand photo, but I'm just experimenting. So here I have the camera on a little tiny, like, what do they call those little tabletop tripod? So it's just barely above the ground, shooting with a wide angle. This was at 7 millimeters. So he's landing on the target. He's coming towards the target. So the camera is like right above the target that has the mealworms. And, I just wanted to get a little vignette of my house with the bluebird, and kind of just show that they're, common yard birds, this kind of habitat. And this was at f5.3 or 5.6. So it kind of shows like the physics of lenses too. And that's always something you have to think about. So here I got the house being like nearly in focus at like 5.6. You would never do that with a telephoto. Which I guess also leads me to realize I didn't talk about subject to camera to subject distance. I talked so many times about having the clean background, and one way you get that is that low angle. But another way is to have the subject to background distance be ideally twice what the camera to subject distance is. So we're starting with the photographer to the subject is X. And then we want from the subject to the background to be 2X. That's ideal. You want at least to be 1X. 3X is wonderful. And, so with a telephoto lens, the camera is right on the bird. Like you wouldn't even tell that's a house. But with the wide angle, the physics is different. And at 5.6, you can still see that the house is almost in focus, even though the camera's darn near touching the bird. So the bird came in, ate the mealworms, jumped on the camera and pooped. So then, because I feed them, like they're trained.
That one spot every time.
Yeah, but like I feed them in like a little pan. Yeah, so Vince asked, how do I know the bird's going to come there? And that's because it's the target is this little baking pan that I put the mealworms in. So all I have to do is go outside my house and say, bluebirds! And the bluebird's waiting in 2 seconds, he's on the mealworms, So, because I start, as soon as I see that they're nesting in the nest box in front of the house, I start feeding them. And in no time, they understand food. Food is such a commodity for animals. And, you just feed them a couple of days, you got them trained. So I knew that there were fox on my property. By the way, I didn't really mention that either. I have 12 acres. So maybe a third of it is wooded. The other 2/3 are house and horse pasture, so kind of open field. So I've seen foxes a lot. I've seen raccoons a few times. And one year they actually had the baby raccoons in my barn. So I knew they're wild animals. So I've always had a couple of these, these like $100 trail cameras. You can buy them at Cabela's or B&H or whatever. it doesn't have to be this brand, but I've always had Brownings for some reason. It's about $100. So yeah, there's wildlife. This is taken with this $100 camera. So behind the house, there's the woods. Like I said, a third of my property is wooded. And there's this down log. And we just decided that's going to be the photography log. So we just started putting food on it. And we'll just buy inexpensive dog food. And anytime my husband and I tried to go for a walk every day, at least 3 miles, sometimes up to 5. And we always take a plastic bag because like 40% of the time we can find a dead squirrel. So I'll take it, put it in the plastic bag, take it home and put it on the photography log. And they sure enough will take the squirrel every day. So this, fox, here he is in the daytime. That time isn't right because anytime it runs out of batteries, which it does more when it's cold, then if I don't remember to reset the date, it just randomly picks a date. And raccoons, 3 at a time, nonetheless, three at a time. A deer jumping over the photography log. I couldn't find an opossum photo, but they come frequently too. And then a flying squirrel. And there's so much you can do with flying squirrels. I haven't done that yet because it's more advanced than where I am, but I'm going to have some neat photos in the future of flying squirrels. And then a cat that's not ours. I don't know whose cat that is. So we get some undesirables. And then our dog who's on a special diet. So she sneaks out there and she knows she shouldn't. She has a snack once in a while too. But anyhow, so that I'm like, I want some real photos. I don't want, $100 camera photos that are really bad. I want to get some real photos. So I got these Sabra 2 devices. It's made by a company called Cognisys. And you hook these up to your camera. And it's a complex interface there. You have to get the app, and there's a lot of settings you have to control. You set it up Wi-Fi you download the app onto your iPhone or your smartphone or whatever, and then you set all these different settings inside, and it's tricky. So I bought these things early last year. And I had so much trouble. I was trying and trying and trying and trying. And I could power through this. It's like tonight, like we got to power through it. And then I finally realized there's something wrong. Like they're just not working well. Well, it turns out like I was one of the first people to get the Sabra 2. I'd ordered like right when Sabra 1 was merging into the second version, Sabra 2. And they kind of released it before it was fully ready to be released. So I had to send them back. And they had them for 3.5 weeks to fix the software, send them back. By the time they sent them back, my mother was in hospice. So I didn't get any photos until this year. And I'll show you some that I did get, but I only have a few. So this was my setup. This is the photography log in the back. So the camera is covered with a camouflage rain gear. You never know if it's going to rain, so I try to keep things as protected as I can. So that's on a tripod. And that's in blue. And then the flashes, I started with speed lights. And I put just plastic bags over them. They're in red. And then the Sabra sensors are in green. So one of them is too far forward out of the photo, but the green arrow shows you its direction. The purple star is the target where it's going to go off when there's a subject. And then the cheap trail cameras in yellow. So this was a success. So I got this photo of a raccoon on the photography log. And then also this photo of a raccoon on the photography log. The raccoons seem the best subject because they don't tend to mind the flashes. I get photo after photo after photo of them. I haven't succeeded with the fox yet, even with just the trail camera alone has one little red light on it, and you can see the foxes in every photo. He looks nervous, and that's what I'm telling you guys about not having your subjects look nervous. There's nobody there. There's one little light, and he will come and he'll look nervous every time. And he'll just grab something and run, where the raccoon will lay down. I made photos of him laying down, like one leg on each side of the log, and he just eats away, and the flashes are going off, and he doesn't care. But then what happened is I was getting photos and then just black photos. I'm like, okay, so the flashes aren't going off. So I was using speed lights and they time out after 60 minutes. So there is no way you can make the flashes not time out after 60 minutes. So if 60 minutes go by, they don't get triggered, they just go to sleep. They don't wake up no matter what. So then I got these things. I'm like, okay, well, now I've invested like $1,000 plus into the sensors, and now I can't get photos if it doesn't trigger in an hour. And a lot of times, they'll come within an hour, but all those blank photos are really bothering me. What came? What came? So then I bought studio lights. So I found these Godox studio lights. They're like $130 each, and I was already into it for $1,000 on those sensors. So and now I'm using these studio lights, so they have to be plugged in. So now we have this giant electrical cord that goes out there. And then you see those 3 slats. Well, that's a fan. So now I can't put plastic bags over to protect it from rain anymore because, it's got to breathe. So I made these. So I went to Walmart and I bought this, they were like bins like to store things in. And I put it upside down. I cut the front off to have the light come out. I used the packing styrofoam to make the little support so that it can breathe under there. It's kind of all cut away just to keep the roof, give it room to have the fans blow out their air. And so I literally just like finished this. So just last night I got one photo because here you see it's spring now. All this time has elapsed because I've been traveling, and now I'm starting the same issue with my mother-in-law. So she's 97. She's now in the same situation I was last year with my own mother. So it all begins again. And I thought I'd have more free time, and it's not really happened. So this was my most recent setup. The purple star was the target. The camera's still blue. The sensors are now on the tripods, and they're in green. And the trail camera in yellow, and the big studio flashes in red. So just last night, I got this photo. It's not a grand photo, but you can see the fill flash wasn't in the correct position. I would have liked the left side of the face to be flashed a little bit better. But to be honest, I'm still learning flash and its use in wildlife photography. It's been a little project now for about a year, and it's ongoing because it's not really something wildlife photographers use a lot. But I think they don't use it a lot because they don't know it. So I'm trying not to be that person, trying to learn it. And so few little quick tips on macro. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, just a few little things that I like to use. So I like to use this center column tripod. I wouldn't put my big lens on top of that. I like my big tripod or big lens when I do use a tripod locked down on something like that Gitzo, something strong. But how many times I've been doing macro and you realize you're like 1/4 of an inch too high for the ideal view, and you got to move 3 legs. Now you're a little bit too low, and then to get the 3 legs at just the right level. So I like this center column tripod to be able to raise and lower in little increments easily. And then I use the macro rail a lot. It just allows you to get the camera closer without the whole deal being closer. And then this AK flash diffuser. So we'll go through that really quickly. So here's, this kind of tripod I like. I would never use it with the center column that high that it becomes like a monopod on top of a tripod. I'll use it towards the bottom, but just enough that I can go up and down in little increments without moving all 3 legs. Whoop, there was the empty slide. So here's the camera on top of that tripod. I leave just like that much amount, never more, sometimes less. So I can move it up and down in small increments easy. And then this macro rail, I like this really long one. I like to use the heavier tripod when I have it that much off kilter. But especially like in a garden like Chanticleer, they have volunteers who, will yell at you if you get your tripod anywhere near into the garden, if it's into where there's mulch or where the soil is, rightfully so. But here you can get your camera quite a ways into the garden or quite a ways in with the tripod being out. So I use that actually quite a bit. I bought it from Amazon. It was like $30. I use it a lot. And I also can use that to hold a flash bracket when I use flash. but I did talk about the flash bracket here. And this AK diffuser, I like that a lot for macro too. So you have the camera and the flash on top in the hot shoe, and then this fits, the top of the flash fits into the device. And then inside there's like just, it's all white and it just bounces that light all over. Then comes out through that translucent membrane. And if you can use that bottom portion, it bounces around outside the camera a lot. And it just creates a really nice diffuse light. You don't always get to use that bottom portion if you're photographing insects, because if you're getting the camera very close to the insect, that's just sometimes a little too close. But when you can use it, use the whole thing. And then the whole thing just on buttons, like, it just kind of buttons together. And I travel with it, even internationally, just flattened down to nothing. And I can now learn how to put it together pretty quickly and get it up and running. So just a few photos I took using that. So just remember that if you're shooting flash, so set this like at f/22, you're going to get a black background unless the background is that close, and sometimes that looks okay for insects because it might be black anyhow if it was in shadow. But that's a hoverfly and a coneflower in my yard and another hoverfly. I kind of like the hoverflies better than bees because they have red eyes. And a bumblebee on a coneflower and another hoverfly. So that was a little macro thing. And then kind of end with hummingbirds. There's 3 ways of shooting hummingbirds. So one would be using natural light only. But remember, I said you really should have like an 8,000th shutter speed to reliably get everything in focus, the wingtips, and that's kind of hard to achieve. Here in Pennsylvania, we seem to have like not enough light until it gets really harsh, and then it's really harsh. The other way you can use it is using one flash only, but then like that insect, you're going to get a black background. And I think that can look elegant, but not natural. So hummingbirds are not animals of the evening or the night. So it can look elegant, but it doesn't look natural. So what I'm going to briefly touch on is using multi-flash. And I've done a bit of that, not a lot. Last year, I was away during peak hummingbird season. The best time for hummingbirds is maybe late August and September when they're migrating through. You have the biggest numbers because all the young are grown by then. They're going to be going south. And you got hummingbirds coming through frequently because they're migrating. And I was away during the peak time. So I did get a lot of photos, but I can show you a bit about that. But first, this was one taken in natural light. I was just kind of trying to be a little artistic. Doesn't really work, but bokeh background was just light coming through the trees. And I wanted to see how slow I could go. So I did get this at 1/400th of a second, but you do see there's motion blur on the wing and even on the tail. But just to show, sometimes if push comes to shove, sometimes as low as 1/400 can semi-work. So here's the multi-flash hummingbird photography. So this was taken 100% with flash. So the flash lit up the flower, lit up the hummingbird, and lit up the background. If there had been no flash here, this would have been a black screen. So here is my setup for this. The camera is forward of where this photo was taken. I have 2 flashes. The target is the butterfly bush flower, and that's in one of those little like florist vials to keep it moist. It's held in place by what's called a plamp. So a plamp is kind of designed to hold flowers. It's flexible and yet really strong. So it's clipped onto the shepherd's hook on the top, and then the other end is holding the florist thing. And then this is the background I started with the first year. And Chip made that metal frame for me, my husband. And then that was just a painter's cloth. So he just kind of spray painted it green. But the problem is it wasn't stretched. So to get it to look smooth without any hint of like a horizontal thing, it had to be that far away. But in fact, now we have a solid background and it can be right behind the flower and it can be much smaller. But that's my setup. And so you have the camera on the tripod, the flash controller on the camera, 3 to 4 flashes, and then I'll talk about the mini ball head. So the flashes are on a tripod, and then you have the mini ball head, so you can control the angle of the flash really easy. And you have the background, the flower, and then what I would do, I feed the hummingbirds from a hummingbird feeder here regularly. Like every other day, there's a hummingbird feeder hanging from that shepherd's hook. And so the hummingbirds know to come there. So again, it's not they're going to put this up there and they're going to come. Like they have to kind of be trained that that general locale, pretty darn close, is going to have food for them. So then I have the hummingbird solution, and I take ideally a syringe and gently inject a little bit into each flower, so that you can get like a natural looking photo, and yet they're still going to be fed. So here's what I'll use to, a tripod is usually like a 3/8 inch thread. So, but the little ball head is a 1/4 inch. So I'll just have these little converters to make a 3/4 inch, take a 1/4 inch thing. And then the mini ball head. So you have a $14 little thing. You put that on top of the little golden thing we just discussed, and then you put your flash on top of there. So there it is. There's the setup for the flash. We have it on that. I like also that center column tripod for these little flashes. They're lightweight. And then we have the little adapter to go from 3/8 to 1/4, the mini ball head, and the flash. So you want the shutter set to the camera sync speed, which for mine camera is 1/250th of a second. Remember that your exposure with flash is only determined by aperture, ISO, the flash settings, and the distance from the flash to the subject, but not shutter speed at all. So set the camera that if you have the flashes off, you take a photo, it should be black. You want the flashes to be doing all the work here. It's best to photograph early in the day or late in the day, so you can have a more open aperture and a higher ISO. So one might say, why would you want a higher ISO? Like we're always going for low ISOs, particularly in landscape photography. And that's because you want your flashes to recycle faster. So if you have a bigger, more open aperture, the flash doesn't have to work as hard. It doesn't have to pump out as much light, and it can recycle faster, so you can take another photo quicker. So we actually kind of want a higher ISO and a more open aperture. And so that will allow a faster flash recycle time. Or alternatively, you can use that extra give me to have more distance between the flash and the subject, but they don't seem to mind. It can be like, a foot away and they'll just come right in. It can be less than that, they'll come right in. If you do shoot in bright daylight, consider an ND filter. So nobody likes math, but we're going to get into that a little bit. You want to flash is set to manual mode. And that's because if you do TTL, each flash is going to be reading something different. You want all the flashes to give exactly the same duration. So the flashes, the amount of light they give out is not by giving more light at a time, it's having a longer duration. And you want the duration from each flash to be exactly the same. So you have to have them set on manual at exactly the same power. And then you vary, if you want a key light and a fill light, you do that by distance. But each flash should be at the same manual at exactly the same power. So like 1/32, so that they're same flash duration. It's also important that all the flashes are the same model, same manufacturer. So these hummingbirds are beating their wings 50 to 60 beats a second. If one flash company gives slightly longer flash duration, it can look like the hummingbird has 4 wings, because again, that it's by the flash duration is really the shutter speed. It's important to know what your guide number of your flash is. So when you buy the flash, when you buy it, you should know that, or it'll come with a manual. The guide number is defined, it kind of is a measure of power, how much light can that flash pump out. But it's defined as It's defined as the f-stop by the distance in feet. So the manufacturer manufactures the product, and now the manufacturer needs to come up with a guide number to tell people how powerful this flash is. So he puts it on, or she puts it on a camera with an ISO of 100, 10 feet from the target, and now the manufacturer needs to determine what aperture will give the correct exposure. So again, we have 4 things when we're determining our exposure with flash. We have the aperture, the ISO, the power of the flash, and the distance. So that distance is 10 feet, the ISO is 100, the flash is what it is, and the other variable is what's the aperture. So that's how you determine the guide number, the f-stop by the distance in feet. So with 10 feet being standard. So the time exposure is determined by the flash duration of the camera shutter speed. We want about 1/32, which is equivalent to 1/15,000 or 1/20,000 shutter speed. So the flashes can give a flash duration that's so much faster than a shutter could ever be. And that's one advantage of using flash here. So I know nobody wants to hear about algebra and math, but here we go. So there's this website called Scan Tips, and that will tell you if you know all these numbers for your flash. So my flash has a guide number of 190. So like if I'm going to shoot at 1/32, the guide number is 33.6. You know, there's the inverse square law in play here. The inverse square law says we double the distance, we only get a quarter of the light, or as we half the distance, we get 4 times the light. So that's why the numbers are like, they're squares, they're not, you know, it's not linear. So if we know the guide number is defined as the f-stop by the distance. If we do algebra and we reverse that, the guide number divided by the f-stop is the distance. So again, if I'm going for a flash power of 1/32, my flash is a guide number of 190. We want an f-stop of 16, the distance will be 2.1 feet. So these flashes have to be pretty darn close to the subject. So, but practically speaking, you could start here and kind of, you know, use this as a rough guideline. All right, so we'll wrap her up. So final thoughts and, you know, my best advice. So know your camera. There's been so many times I've been in situations where little gremlin gets inside the camera, you know, and suddenly your settings are different or something weird pops up. Know how to fix that quickly. You know, you're wildlife shooting, you know, the subjects are out there. They're not waiting for you to have a camera problem. Or you want to try a new technique. You want to be able to jump on that quickly. Know your subject and subjects, you know, knowing your field craft, knowing where they're going to be, when they're going to be, what they might be doing, what they might do next is just so important. Remember that the best photos often start and sometimes even end on your sofa. Nothing can replace time behind the camera and behind the lens. But I feel I learn as much by sitting on the sofa, you know, watching webinars, reading, you know, I had natural history books. I probably have several hundred natural history books. Whenever I go on a trip, you know, I'll buy books about every species and just be prepared. I buy photography books, you know, yeah, I'll study contests and winners and what settings they used, particularly bird photographer of the year. It's maybe my goal to be included in bird photographer of the year. Every year they publish a book and they'll have like the 100 photos and they'll say what the shutter speed was, what the f-stop was, what the ISO was, what the focal length was. And I imagine being the photographer. I imagine like what did he or she, you know, what was the lighting like? And why did they choose the shutter speed? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? And you can get good just by doing that. And so you just do a lot of that. It just kind of beats like being behind the camera doing the same thing over and over and over. Remember that perfect practice makes perfect, not just practice makes perfect. You know, you got to get it right. And if you do the same thing over and over and over, but you're not improving, you're not improving. Practice new techniques in shooting, you know, even when wildlife is not present. I remember having a discussion with Vince about what the shutter speed is for rain. Well, I figured that out by just standing on my porch and shooting into the black space and seeing, well, if I want the rain to look like this, what shutter speed should I select? If it's coming down harder, what shutter speed should I select for this? You don't want to figure that out when there's an animal in front of you because, they're not going to be waiting for that. And, now I'm trying a little bit of ICM and, even wildlife with birds, ICM can look nice. So I'll go and just try that on Canada geese, like a low value subject or gulls when I go to the beach. Be a waiter and not a searcher. So there's different, so first we have to find the wildlife before we can photograph them, for goodness sakes. And I would recommend finding a good place where wildlife are likely to be and waiting for them to move into that space. Like particularly going for a walk with your camera through the woods is generally not the way to do it. The birds hear you coming, animals see you coming, they hear you coming. They're not going to be in a good position for a photo. It's better, even if you're in the woods, to sit down quietly and wait. And if you're in a position, where there are many animals, like it wasn't that long ago, I was in the Falkland Islands, there are giant colonies of birds. And it's just like overwhelming. There's suddenly like hundreds of birds in front of you, for the first 15 or 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. And eventually get yourself under control and say, where's the best light, Jacqui? Wait for them to move into the best light. Just don't go randomly shooting. So be a waiter, not a searcher, and be patient. Find the best light and the best background. Again, we want that really nice, smooth, uncluttered background. Where's the best background? Wait till your animal moves into that instead of just, randomly shooting around. So then work the scene. First, get the safety shot. And then you can try, first we want to make sure we're going to get a shot at all. So get the standard profile, your safety shots, make sure you got something in the bag. And then when you're confident with that, try something different, try a different camera, different, wider angle. Or on the other hand, try to get that detail photo, like that turkey feather photo I showed you. Try slow shutter speed and panning, try intentional camera movement. We're not always going to try to be in the same photo every time. And remember, a great photo of a common subject is much better than a poor photo of a rarer subject. I can't tell you the number of times I've been someplace. Well, like most recently, Arizona, the subject was the hummingbirds. There they have like 10 species of hummingbirds coming to the feeder. But it was harsh light. It was feeder photos. There wasn't any way to get something natural. I got the turkey feather photo. I'm the only one photographing the turkeys, because they're so common. But, I think I walked away with a better photo than the people who were chasing the better subject. Having the right equipment makes a big difference. As you can see, well, maybe not when we were setting this up, but otherwise I'm a little bit of an equipment junkie. Hey, once I understand it, I'm good. So having the right equipment can really make a big difference. I don't always get to use everything I have. I do travel a lot. Sometimes I have to travel really lightly when there's a lot of small flights on third world countries. You're really limited what you can take, but having the right equipment makes a big difference. Be prepared for failure and keep trying. The animals are not always where you want them, when you want them, but you got to keep trying. You got to be creative. You got to keep pushing the envelope and, eventually, hopefully you'll get what you need. So some resources, Journal of Wildlife Photography. I'd highly recommend that. It's an online journal, but they have monthly online trainings that are really good by top wildlife photographers. They run a monthly contest, which I happened to win last month. So I'm really plugging them. Thank you, $500. Photo Wild, that's another online journal. Joe and Marianne at McDonald are two wildlife photographers. They live like 2 to 3 hours from here. They have some good stuff on their website. Alan Murphy, probably the king of backyard and setup wildlife photography or bird wildlife photography. So if you're interested in doing more in your backyard, when I agreed to do this talk, I'd hope to talk more about backyard setups, but just with my mother being so sick and just life taking over and so many other projects, I didn't get to do as much of that as I had hoped. But if you're interested in that, I'd recommend Alan Murphy. Greg Basco for the flash photography and macro is excellent. That Merlin Bird ID app. So if you don't know what birds you're seeing in your yard or hearing in your yard, that might be the place to start. You get the Merlin app, you just put the sound ID on and it'll be live and you'll see it like what bird is speaking at the time you have the app open. From that, you can learn about the bird and you could also take a photo and upload the photo and learn what bird it is and then learn about the bird. Bird photographer, the yearbooks. Like I said, I've learned so much. They're on the 10th year now. I bought all the back editions, spent hours reading them. Imagine what it was like to be in the photographer's shoes at the time it was taken, why they used the shutter speeds and apertures and focal length they did. And I've just learned so much. You have a ton of natural history books and that Scan Tips website for the flash settings guide. And contact information. Again, all this will be in that PDF that Ginny will send out, or I can put them maybe on the Facebook page. And then these are the camera settings for the photos of the wildlife. And you can have that in the PDF too. All right, questions?
Great.
That was great.
You were worried.
Oh my God.
Great. Really was.
Better focus on.
Any questions, anybody? It's over. Yes. I'm going to Iceland.
Question?
We have a person who asked, where am I going next? And at the end of this month, I'm going to Iceland. The big draw there is puffins. So on Grimsey Island, it's like north of the main body of Iceland. But then I'm meeting up with two friends in advance and we're going to do some waterfalls and things like that too. So little landscape. And then South Africa in August. Yeah. I think Sylvia says, thank you, Jacqui. Great presentation.
Gonna stop the share online.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm done.
It's really great.
Thank you. Everybody take a calendar before you leave. Yeah, here. Look at August. All right, we're signing off.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you, everybody in Zoom land and in real land. Well, that wasn't so bad. I kind of rose to the occasion.